So it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce to you two visionary and trailblazing participants in today's event. Sotomayor Cauce is the 33rd president of the University of Washington and the first Latina to hold this position. Now we got it. Now I got it. She's been on the faculty since 1986. She came to us after earning degrees from the University of Miami and Yale University. She is a noted scholar on risk and resilience among adolescents and has received numerous awards for her research, as well as a University Distinguished Teaching Award. Since becoming president in 2015, she has spearheaded a number of initiatives, including prior to becoming president, playing a key role in establishing the Husky Promise, which is a program that has helped more than 40,000 low-income students attend the University of Washington. By her resume, by the way, she's been one of the most hardworking individuals on this campus, having been the chair of the Departments of American Ethnic Studies and Psychology, and the dean of the Colleges of Arts and Sciences, and the provost prior to becoming president. As president, in addition to upholding the promise within the Husky Promise, she has also established significant initiatives that place a spotlight on population health across the university and race and equality. Finally, she's also been a champion for the public mission of the university, which, as I said, on the one side, champions access for the greatest cross-section of individuals, but for the purpose of creating impact. And Sotomayor has said she wants us to be judged to be the greatest public research institution as measured by the impact we create, not only locally, regionally, nationally, but globally. So I'm pleased to be able to have introduced my new boss, President Sotomayor Cauce. So Justice Sonia Sotomayor was born in the Bronx, New York, and she earned her BA from Princeton University and her JD from Yale Law School. Prior to her appointment as a judge, she served as an assistant district attorney in New York County, and then as a litigator with the firm of Pavia and Harcourt. In 1991, she was nominated to the bench to the U.S. District Court in the Southern District of New York by President George H.W. Bush. In 1997, President William Jefferson Clinton nominated her to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. And finally, President Barack Obama nominated her as an Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court in May 2009. She assumed this role in August of 2009, and she became the first Latina to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court in the history of this country. Though most of you know Justice Sotomayor for the formidable intellectual gifts we see demonstrated in her oral argument questioning and in her written legal opinions, having met the justice once before in an event in Irvine and having dished the positive gossip about her with one of her former clerks, NYU law professor Melissa Murray, I can also say that she is a wonderfully kind human being who cares enormously about law's impact on people, and this too is evidenced in her legal opinions. Finally, we're here to celebrate the Justice as an author, and we know her to be the author of the best-selling national autobiography, My Beloved World. She's the author of 2 additional books, The Beloved World of Sonia Sotomayor, and her new book, which I guess, well, I will say, is available for purchase out in the lobby, Turning Pages, My Life Story. So it is with great honor and deep affection that I introduce to you Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Thank you so much.
Can somebody lend me copies of my books? That one and the other one, the little one? I'll return them, I promise. Thank you. Thanks, guys. There's a version in Spanish. Who has it? I promise. Thank you, guys.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
About 4 years ago, I had the incredible honor to interview Justice Sotomayor when her first book came out. It was a peak experience that I never thought would be repeated, although she promised me that we'd see each other again. And of course, she was right. And
I keep my promises.
absolutely. You know, I've read your first book various times, and it continues to be someplace that I can go when you have those days where you need a little bit more inspiration. I'm wondering,
Maybe I should read my book more.
actually, it's not a bad idea, let me tell you. But I'm wondering, at this point, you've had a chance to share your incredible story with a number of audiences. What's that been like?
Oh, it's been the most extraordinary experience to have people come back to me after they've read my book and to share with me the experiences in their life that were similar. I often tell the story, during a working term for the court, none of us can read a book from beginning to end because we're kind of busy with other things. But Justice Ginsburg read my book a few chapters at a time over a number of weeks. And virtually every Friday thereafter, she would come to me before conference started and say, Sonia, I had a very similar experience. And she did that every week, and it was so touching. And that has been one of the most gratifying things of having written my biography, having people share how their lives are so similar to mine.
Well, that's just tremendous. I certainly have those moments when I very much see some of the same struggles, and I think that that's what makes them so compelling. You know, it's not that unusual for someone of your stature to write an autobiography. Now, it is unusual to have them then write a book for middle school students, for younger students. What inspired you to talk to that audience? Why was it important for you?
Well, there are two answers. There's an old saying, kids are our future. Thank God they're here, because we adults have not done a terribly good job about the future we're leaving them. We're leaving them with some very wonderful new things and accomplishments, but we're leaving them with a lot of things that need to be looked at and improved, and the world needs some help in solving its remaining problems. And I truly believe that the answer comes in kids doing it. We've tried. We haven't done a great job, but I think they can do a better job.
Well, let's hope so.
I really do. And I thought that for those kids who look at me and say, I'm too young, how can I do this? I don't know how to do this. Or for the kids who say to me, you know, my life has been really tough, and I'm not sure that I can do this. I want to tell both sets of kids, yes, you can do it. And it doesn't matter how hard your life has been, how many failures you may have had along the way of growing up, because we all have them. Hope is possible. And you can accomplish what I'm talking about. Being very successful in life and playing a role, an important role, in trying to make the world better. So how do I know that? Because now I'm a justice of the Supreme Court. But I didn't start out that way. And there were many people who thought that given my life and its circumstances, I couldn't do it. But I have. And if I could do it, you can do it. So this is where I grew up. And this is where I am now.
One of the things that was very striking for me in reading even the Turning Pages, that's for very young readers, is you were very, very honest and very candid about some of the things that you had to overcome. The loss of your father, your being diagnosed with diabetes, etc. And you have succeeded at the highest level. What qualities do you think it takes to be able to do that? What qualities should we be nurturing in our children, or do our children need to be able to have that resilience that you obviously have?
Well, in this front cover, the kids are going to see, and maybe the adults, my holding a key in my hand. And that key explains the purpose of this book. Because I'm offering you the key to my success, the secret. And that secret was very simply reading and learning. Reading let me see a world I could never imagine. You see, in the world I grew up, there were no lawyers, there were no judges. There were a lot of poor people like me. There were a lot of people who couldn't speak English because they came from other countries and they were struggling to learn English. And for those people, for us, sometimes you need help. And for me, that help was books. It was reading about what was possible to become. And that is really the key to success, is learning how important words are to creating pictures in your mind about things you may never see, but also telling you what the possibilities are in the world. And so that, I think, is the most important ingredient, curiosity, and the use of books to learn those things you know nothing about. Maybe I had to repeat her questions.
Okay, now you can hear me? Now you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So, look, you need to work hard. Everybody works hard who succeeds. There's nothing nobody does that comes easy. Every sports athlete that every child in this room admires, in any sport, in any type of competition, they practice endlessly. They also have to read, by the way, because they have to read playbooks, and they have to be able to explain their own plays in words and sometimes in writing. So you do need hard work. You do need the will to want to do something. And that you get by dreaming big, by imagining yourself being able to do things that you work to figure out how to do. And that's really how we change the world, isn't it? Wanting to and then doing something about it. So for me, those are the ingredients.
Well, that's tremendous. I love the idea. I hadn't quite noticed the key, and you are giving us the key to your success. That is tremendous. We are so lucky for that. One other thing that clearly...
By the way, I do want kids and adults to look at the book. There's so many little things in here in these pictures. You see the little frog on the front?
Oh, yes, cookie.
A cookie. That plant is from Puerto Rico, and my parents are from Puerto Rico. And one of the biggest symbols of Puerto Rico is the little frog, the coqui. And that little frog is tiny. You can barely see him on a leaf because he blends in, he and she blend in. But late at night, the coquis come out, and they have the biggest voice imaginable. You can hear them from miles away. Cookie, cookie. The words on the steps, those words are the words of a decision that I wrote on the Supreme Court. And that decision involves kids in school and what rights kids have if the police come to their school and question them. And then one of my favorites. This is a little bit part sad, part happy. This picture shows when my dad died.
Yes.
And this picture shows how I dealt with my sorrow, which was going to a library and finding books and books comforting me. And here's me sailing away in my imagination with books. And in the middle there's a picture of not my library card, but a library card from my library in the Bronx. So I hope every kid in this room has a library card. Oh, no, I'm not seeing a lot of hands come up.
If not, they will after this.
Yeah. At any rate, yes, the book does have so much about my life, so you have to look at the pictures carefully.
Well, one more thing that's clear that's important to you. Turning Books is already in English and in Spanish, and I know that the others will be translated into Spanish as well. What was it like for you growing up in a home where they spoke two languages?
I didn't know to love it at the time. It was a little confusing.
And in fact, Spanish was a primary language.
Oh, in my home, I learned Spanish before English. And when I went to school, I wasn't a top student. I was passing, but not a top student. It wasn't until the 4th grade that I began to read in the library to escape the unhappiness in my home that I shot up to be a top student. And my mother tells me the story that she went to school one day and they told her that she had to stop speaking Spanish at home so I could learn English better. And my mother says you never fought with teachers back then? She shook her head yes, and she came home and said, I'm not doing that.
Yes.
First of all, my dad barely spoke English, if at all, and I was going to talk to my dad, and my grandmother didn't speak English, and for sure I was talking to her. And so that went by the wayside, okay?
Yes,
but it is a challenge. It is critically important to me that everything that I write and publish, except court cases, because I can't control this, that everything else that I write and I can authorize to be published, that it be translated. And it come out in Spanish as well. You see, first of all, I want everybody else to learn Spanish. So it's great if you're just starting out, or even if you're not. With Pasando Páginas, I learned so many new words in Spanish. Buy them both and compare them, okay?
And have your kids compare them.
Exactly. And a lot of my friends, when My Beloved World came out, bought the Spanish edition. Friends who were like me, learned Spanish at the home. They brought both versions and read them side by side. So books and writings can help you. But I think what's most important is for people to know that Spanish is important to me because it is a part of who I am.
Yes.
And it's a part of my soul.
Yes.
I am, above all else, a woman with a Latina soul, created by my family and my culture, by all of the things that they taught me to love, including my grandmother who taught me poetry. And the beginning scene is me walking with my grandmother, going to buy our chicken, and her reciting poetry on Saturday nights. And she's the one who taught me to love what words could paint in your head. And so for me, that Latina culture is vibrant within my soul. That's not to say something that's very important and people might forget. I am also one of the proudest Americans you'll ever meet. And I don't ever believe there's a tension between the two.
Agreed.
Every parent in this room, every human being in this room has a heart big enough to love more than one child and more than one person. If our heart is big enough to do that, we can love a lot more than just one culture.
Absolutely.
And so it is this place, America, to me is both things.
I'm right with you on both of those. Absolutely. You know, another thing, one of the things is that was very striking to me is I don't think that sometimes people give children credit for being able to take in ideas. And even in Turning Pages, which is for young readers, your love of law and your faith in the power of law to create a fair and just world really shines through. It's very vivid. How should we be talking to our children about the nature of law and justice?
All right. When you're a kid,
Just a softball.
all right. When you're a kid, to understand what law is that it's a set of rules. You have house rules at home, right? You can't watch television until you finish your homework. That's a favorite rule, right? You can't take your brother or sister's toy without asking them permission, right? You have to say please and thank you. Those are all house rules, right? They're life rules. And they're about how you treat people and how you behave yourself with others. And that's what laws do. They're about our relationships with one another and how we're going to act with each other. So simplest of all rules, red and green lights, right? You stop at a red light. Why? Kids would say, because mommy and daddy told me to, right? But the reality is, there's a law that told mommy and daddy that that's what we all have to do. And we all understand why that law is good for the community, right? Because we understand that if you stop at a red, more people can get to where they're going safely. But every one of us, when we stop at a red light, gives up something. We give up the ability to rush to where we want to go and get there faster. And we do it because we like that law, right? Now, that's what many laws are about. They're accommodating the needs of all of us and trying to get us to live together in a way where we can cause each other the less harm or do the most good for most people. Now, there are some laws, not all of them, but some, with time where you're going to say, I don't really think that that's right. That law is really not doing what I think it should be doing. It's not valuing our competing interests in a way that makes sense. Well, what happens when that happens? You who are interested in not being bystanders in life, you have to get up and change those laws. Laws are made by people. And sometimes they're made at a time where the bargain that the law is striking is a good one. But over time, because things change, they don't become helpful to our relationships. And that's when people who are interested in not being bystanders and letting laws happen to them become interested in changing them and making the world we live in a better place. So that's why I'm passionate about law. I can't
And
do
we're lucky that you are.
Well, I can't do politics. I'm asked to interpret the laws. That's my job. And so I can't do what I'm encouraging you to do. And that's why I'm out here, because I want not everyone in this audience, but all the kids here to grow up understanding that you can change things for the better. You can make that better world. You just got to work at it and change it in ways that seems more just to you. And yes, that's why I'm passionate about law. I'm passionate about the relationships we have with one another.
Terrific. We've been collecting questions.
All right. You should know that when I was a kid, Mommy called me a hot potato. I never sat still. And I bet some of your parents are going to tell you I was a perfect child. I was not. I didn't misbehave, but I never sat still. And I drove my poor mommy crazy. And I still can't sit still. She got a good time out of me. But I'm going to walk around the audience, and I'll shake some hands, and I'll hug some people. I really like hugging kids, so if they hug me, that would be really nice. But you don't have to if you don't want to. But the most important thing is, all of these people with little things in their ears, men and ladies, or ladies and men, they're U.S. Marshals, most of them. Some of them are local police. And their job is to keep me safe from myself. They don't like me doing this, so unless you're a kid, don't jump up too much, okay?
So we've got some questions here. Many of them did come from the younger members of the audience. I'm going to ask them, but also say who asked the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, where's that nice photographer who was with me? Come on. You're going to make sure she
Now,
gets it, right?
Is Mia age 8 in the audience?
Hello, Mia.
Okay,
Come on
Mia.
down. Come,
Mia
come
has a question for you.
Hello, Mia. How old are you? You're 8 years old. Thank you for asking your question. Would you give
Okay.
me a hug?
Mia wants to know, what are the 3 top challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them? Just because they're
It
young
is a
doesn't make
hard
them easy.
question. I'm trying to, Mia, is it okay if I don't put them in order of hardness, that I just give 3? Okay? Because there were actually a lot more. The first, I think, is the challenge everybody has, every child and every adult. And it's to get over the fear of doing new things when we're afraid that we might fail. And a lot of people don't do some things that are good or might be good for them because they're afraid. And getting over that fear, taking a chance on doing something new, that's hard. The way I do it is, first I talk about it. Because if you let fear just sit in your stomach, it starts eating away at you. And most of the time you give in to it because it consumes you. But if you talk to people about it, especially friends, or people who might have knowledge of whatever you're afraid of, they might be able to explain to you why you shouldn't be afraid. And they help you make a decision that's good for you because you really thought it through instead of being afraid. The second challenge that I face, among many, I told you it's not in order of importance, is being afraid that because I had a condition, diabetes, that I might not be able to do a lot of things. And that's hard because sometimes when you have a challenge, There are some things you can't do. And there are things you have to be careful about. But I also found out that if I imagined myself like Supergirl, can you hold that, Jeff? Thank you. Let me show you that picture. I didn't have to be afraid of giving myself injections. So sometimes you have to reach deep within you for courage to do things and try things that you're not sure you can actually do. And if you learn how to take care of yourself like I did, then even special conditions won't stop you. Sometimes you have to figure a way around things, you know? And other times you may not be able to do things exactly the same way everybody else does, but you find a way. And then the third thing, everybody thinks that reading, writing, and speaking English, you learn it at home, right? You should be able to do all three things naturally. It should just happen. Teachers will teach you how to write. You'll figure out how to speak right. Well, it's not that simple. And it's not so natural. It took me until I went to college to figure out how to write English well. That's a long time to figure out something that everybody else was doing better than me. But I went to college. A professor said to me, "You're not writing properly." And I took a lot of time to teach myself how to write English. And how to speak, and speak in a crowd like this, that takes practice too. And so those were three of the challenges that I have faced. There's plenty more. Read my book. Can I get a help? Thank you.
Do we have Gabriela, age 13? All right, Gabriela. We have a question.
Where are you?
She's right behind you.
Oh my gosh, she's coming up behind. Hello.
There you go.
Hello.
Gabriela wants to know, what was your inspiration to become a judge?
Lawyers have to. Gabriela, where did you sit down again? Thank you. I didn't see where you were. Lawyers represent a person or an institution. And when they're making arguments in court, they're trying to make the best arguments for that person or what we call that party, the party they're representing. A judge, instead, listens to both sides and gets to decide what the answer is under the law, what the right answer is under the law. And for me, I loved being a lawyer. I loved helping people. I loved representing them in court. But I love more being able to figure out what I think is the right answer under law. So that was my inspiration.
Now, this young person didn't put their name down, but if it's you, please stand up. Now, the question is, I think it's a great one. If you weren't a Supreme Court justice, what would you want to be? Please, young man over here, will you please let her know?
Where are you? I'm glad you asked that question. You're not going to like it, but your
and
mother
we're going to
is.
have to get him a Husky t-shirt.
There is a problem because I've thought about that a lot. Would I do something else? And I don't know. Because I loved being a lawyer and I loved being a judge. Now, that doesn't mean that if there wasn't any such thing, I wouldn't have figured something else out. But I never had to, because for me, this is the perfect job. That's the hardest thing in life to do, is to find the perfect job for yourself, you know?
We all think so too, by the way.
Yeah, no. And some people have to do 2 or 3 or 4 different kinds of jobs before they figure out the right one. But I'm one of those lucky people. I'm living my dreams. So I'm hoping you'll find your dream and you'll live it too.
Terrific, thank you. Now, here's another anonymous question, but will you please talk a bit about what it's like living in the public eye? And
horrible.
what keeps you grounded on a daily basis? I don't know who asked that one, but...
Who asked that question? You did? Oh, no. Okay. Is somebody going to admit to asking that question? All right. I shouldn't say horrible.
All right, over here, the young woman.
Oh, where?
Front row.
Hello. Hi. If you want to come up or wait till I come down, it's up to you. Okay. Look, I love moments like this, moments in which I'm sharing with people, and these are very special. And when I meet someone on the street who comes up and hugs me and says something nice, it's really very, very touching. But there is a part of living a public life that is intrusive. So if I'm sitting in a restaurant and I'm putting food to my mouth and I see somebody at the other table with a cell phone coming up from the table, taking a picture of me with food in my mouth. Happens all the time. Or what's worse, I'm sitting there eating with family or friends and somebody says, "Can you take a picture with me? I'm leaving." Or, and this happens too, things get reported that are not true. You know, some of them are made up. Some of them are just, "Hi, how are you?" Some of them are half-truths that people embellished. Came home the first summer after I was a justice, and on the internet, thank you, someone reported that I was back in my neighborhood walking the streets with someone arguing with them about how to cook chicken. Now, we weren't arguing, we were talking. But most importantly, why would anybody care? Thank you.
Oh, look at the camera.
Thank you. But that happens a lot. And it happens on more weighty matters. What we're doing on the Supreme Court or not, why we're doing it, who's arguing with whom. All of that is not just annoying, not just intrusive, but I think it damages the court and our sense of comfort with each other. And for me, that's a negative about it. I try very hard to live as normal a life as I can. Thank you. Still do my own shopping. I don't do delivery. I still go to stores. You learn how to manage certain things, like it's 9 o'clock and the store closes at 9:30. And somebody comes up for a picture and I'll say, "If you wait for me, yes, but I have to finish my shopping." So you do manage, but I think it is not an easy thing to do. Come on down.
Terrific. Now, I've got a question that also does not have a name, so please stand up. What advice do you have for a girl who wants to make a positive difference in the world?
Oh.
All right.
Are you together or separate? Come. Come on. All right, I'm going to cut across, okay? Because going up and down the steps, as you see, isn't my easiest thing. You know, that's a very hard question for the following reason. I think there's a lot
A crowd surfing Supreme Court justice. Yay!
Hello. Who asked that question?
The little girl, a little girl that you had seen a little bit earlier, a young woman.
A young woman.
There she
Hello.
goes.
You took a picture with me, right? Yes, thank you. You know, it is true that society still treats women differently than men. There's a lot of studies that say that women often get paid less than men when they're doing the same job. And there are some people who think who think that girls and women can't do some things as well as men. Thank you. But what we as a, or you, come around this way. Thank you. Boy, they're as tall as I am. You got it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Taller, shh. We girls, we women, have to have the courage of believing in ourselves and in knowing that we not only can do anything men can do, and sometimes better,
Yes.
but that we should never be ashamed of that. You know, when I was a girl, some of my girlfriends didn't want to show they were smart because they thought boys didn't like smart girls. If you have a chance, see Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's movie, have your mom or grandmother show it to you. She married a man because he thought she was as important as he was. And she became a Supreme Court justice. So, have the courage, always, to be a proud girl. And then second, use that pride to do the things that you think are important to better the conditions for yourself and for other women. So I'll tell you a little story. Justice Ginsburg, at one point, was asked about how she was treated on the Supreme Court, and was she treated any differently than men were treated? And her response was something like, well, the reality is that sometimes when I say things, people don't hear me. And how many women have had that feeling? Yeah. All right. So I thought about what she said, and one of the little things I do is when Justice Ginsburg says something, and then one of my male colleagues says it, and everybody says, what a smart idea. When it comes my turn, I look up and I say, Ruth said that first. But it shouldn't just be me. Men in the room have an obligation to do the same thing. It's not one-sided. When you're in the room and a woman says something smart, say it. Why is it that you say it when men do, but you don't when women do? And so it's a work that we all have to do. Thank you for that question. Hello. How are you?
Well, I'm going to take the prerogative of having the last question. Madame Justice, you are so good at connecting with young people, at talking to them directly and honestly. Are there any more children's books in your future?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you give us a little preview?
Yep. All right. Thank you. Next September. Again, I hope around this time of the year. I have only a working title, and so the title might change. It's called Just Ask. And it's another children's book. It was born from something that I've wanted to do forever. To write about children who have different conditions in life, because there's so many of them. And it was born from something that happened to me when I was in a restaurant one day, and I was sitting at a table and took out my injection and gave myself a shot before I eat, which is something I have to do. And as I was leaving the restaurant, and I was walking by these two people, I heard one of the women lean over to another and say, "She's a drug addict." And I stopped, and I thought about it, and I went over and I said, "No, I'm not a drug addict. I'm a diabetic. And I take that injection to stay alive. Please don't assume because I do something different that it means that I'm doing something bad." And I left. But that incident has always stayed in the back of my head, which is people see some kids doing some things different, like maybe misbehaving or what they think is misbehaving. Or sometimes other kids see a kid doing something a little bit different, and you think, they're different. I maybe should be a little scared of them. And so I wanted to write a book about many of those differences, and to explain not only to other kids, but to adults actually, what those differences are and why, and how those differences make us stronger in some ways, how it's hard in a lot of ways, but how the world is richer because of our differences. And so I put it in a garden, this story, and I explained that, some trees need light and some don't. Some plants need more water and other plants need less. Those differences don't make one better than the other. They help create a diverse, more beautiful garden. And so kids like me, with things like diabetes, or allergies, or Down syndrome, or attention deficit, or not being deaf, that all of those conditions have frustrations for sure, but that they are enriching in many other ways. So, that's my next book. Just Ask.
Okay.
All right.
So one more excuse to bring her back. Let's give it up for the Justice.
Are you sister?